From American Falls to Malad, we've got the biggest stories in District 5 covered. This is the Southeast Idaho Prepcast with Jordan Kay.
That's right. Welcome into the Southeast Idaho Prepcast here on IdahoSports.com, your weekly destination for all things District 5 athletics. I'm Brandon Baney, and I'm joined by the guy who always sweeps the corners, Jordan Kay. What's going on, Jordan?
Heck yeah, I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Doing real good. So Jordan is a sports writer at the Idaho State Journal in Pocatello, in case you missed our debut episode last week where we kind of got to know Jordan a little bit better. What's been going on down at the paper this week?
Trying to hit as many of these fall camps as we can. So, going throughout District 5, calling coaches, trying to get out to their practices. And, we're going to have a preview little section in the paper out before high school football season starts, jam-packed with, every preview from just about every team. And so, right now is collecting all of that information and so we can get that going.
Yeah, two-a-days started on Monday, so you've already been making the rounds to various camps, right?
Yes. Highland, Pocatello on Monday. Today will probably be Snake River and Blackfoot. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's a good – the dog likes that. Yeah.
I was like, oh, crap, you got to leave. Oh,
no. Yeah, so and then you're also doing a lot with Idaho State University also, right?
Yeah, so their fall camp started last Friday. They're getting going a little bit, but it's going to be an interesting season for them because they return their starting quarterback, but heck, everyone returns everyone from this year. I mean, not many people in the Big Sky left, so that's going to be kind of an interesting thing to watch out for. Is like everyone got their year back from COVID. How is that going to impact recruiting, and how is that going to impact their play on the field? So yeah, those will. Bunch of fun stuff going on.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued to see how the Big Sky Conference handles because they all just did this in the spring and then the short turnaround back to the fall. That'll be interesting to watch. So let's we're not here to talk about ISU Bengals. No. This is the District 5 Prepcast here on IdahoSports.com. And I think any discussion that starts when you talk about the football teams in this area, I think you have to start down in Dayton with the West Side Pirates. They are a 2A powerhouse. They won the title again last year, and they bring back a lot of talented players.
Yeah, I think everyone looks at it and they're like, oh, Westside lost their stud linebacker and Tate Stagelmeyer, who even last year was kind of playing hurt a little bit, but I mean, you really couldn't tell what they shut out Firth in the state championship game 39-0. I think they only had like 2 games where the opponent scored more than 7 points or something like that. It was just an incredible defensive performance. And, we talked to like Tyson Moser and, he's kept that defensive staff pretty set. He doesn't really touch them. He doesn't, go and micromanage or try and do much with them. And it just works. I don't know if it's because they have just better athletes. A lot of it though, just seems to be the scheme. The guys in that defense, they buy into what their coaching staff is telling them to do, and then they just execute it. I mean, it does help when you've got athletes and their offense isn't, too shabby. Blaze Brown's a solid quarterback. He makes the right decisions. Cage Brokens is a power back who can just about at any point go off for about 10 to 20 yards. And then you've got arguably one of the best athletes in the state in Bryla Shurtleff, who, I mean, is just a monster. He was the only kid in the state to be an all-state selection at 3 different positions. He did it as a wide receiver, I think as a safety, and then as like a punter. So, I mean, the kid, I saw him in basketball season. He's just a tall, lengthy kid who can move pretty, free and just gets to his spots like no one's business. It's a really fun team to watch. It'll be interesting to see, how the other teams in 2A respond to them. I know Bear Lake lost Owen Tusher. That's going to be a big one. He was a quarterback who pretty much gave that defense, their biggest test of the season. Last season, Westside only came out with a 7-0 win against Bear Lake. And, I think that was a kind of like a moral victory for the Bears. It was like, hey, guys, this is the best team in the state. They don't get, first of all, they don't hold people if not for a couple Bear Lake turnovers, that game would have been a lot closer. And the other thing is, the Bear Lake defense holding, Blaze Brown and Bryler Shirtliff and Cage Brokens to 7 points. It was like, oh, hey, that's a pretty good thing to do. And so that's going to be an interesting thing. Can the other teams in 2A District 5 kind of catch up and get on Westside's level? And I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, so I think when we try to identify what makes Westside so good, I think it's a confluence of all the things you just said. Yes, they have good athletes, but so do a lot of 2A programs across the state, right? Yeah. The key is coupling the good athletes with a great coaching staff, and like you said, the schemes. I think Westside out schemes pretty much every other team they come across, and that's why those 7-0 games they don't sweat it. I mean, they're never. There's never a lack of confidence where they feel, man, we're really in trouble.
Yeah, because it just seems like the way they keep playing, something's going to go their way. They're going to get an interception. They're going to fall on a fumble. They're going to get a team to punt at the 50-yard line when they don't want to. And it's like, I think they realize they can outlast teams.
Yeah, so that offense they run, the wing T, that's the same offense that my high school team ran. So I know it. I know it well. And the idea is to kind of lull you to sleep. You'll have a 2-yard plunge by the fullback. You'll have a 2-yard run off tackle. And then, it's 3 yards, 2 yards, 4 yards. Then all of a sudden, boom, you hit like a 60-yard run. And that's where the defense has to be ready on every single play, because you never know which play is going to be the big one that breaks it. And that's what makes their offense so fun to watch as well. Yeah. Cage Brokens is great in the open field.
Well, the other thing is, I mean, their time when you run that wing T, the time of possession is just ridiculous sometimes. I mean, there'll be games where they have 2/3 of the clock on their side. And it's like, geez, like, if you're the other team, how do you even win when you don't have the ball? So, yeah, it's an interesting team to watch.
Yeah, we're working on our statewide football previews for every single football team across the state on IdahoSports.com. We got about 70% of the teams up. So if you don't see your favorite team yet, keep checking back, as we're getting more and more of these preseason forms back from coaches. And along with that, we've got these preseason coaches polls of how the coaches think the conference is going to shake out. And those are kind of fluid. Is if we haven't heard from every single coach, a team that's number 4 today could be number 2, depending on how the other coaches vote. But right now, with 4 of the 5 coaches having reported back to us in District 5 from 2A, Aberdeen is the team that coaches have picked to finish second behind Westside. I think that's interesting. Aberdeen kind of had an up and down year last year, but I think they've got lots of potential.
Really? Yeah, that's kind of surprising. And I think that's where the wide openness of that division. I haven't looked too much into Aberdeen. I know they're, Coach Jeff Duffin does a pretty good job over there. So that would be pretty interesting. Can they jump over Bear Lake? I don't think Malad had a great showing last year. Neither did Soda Springs. So yeah, you kind of get into that mode. And I believe that 2A District 5, they send 2 teams to state. Is that right?
Yes.
So realistically, it's just fighting for that second spot, which that's going to be the big thing this year. Not really who can cement Westside, who can get in that second spot.
Yeah, you mentioned Malad. They've got a new coach now, Lucas Thorne, and so whenever there's a new coach, that's always a good opportunity for a team to break through as well. So
yeah,
I agree. That race for second place, I think, is going to be pretty exciting to watch.
Yeah, because Aberdeen has the linebacker. Is that Brody Beck?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I know he leads the defense, but who on their offense kind of has been touted as guys that could really carry them this year?
Yeah, so Aberdeen, when you look at what they did last year, like so many teams, it was such a weird year because of COVID-19, right?
Yeah.
So you look at Beck offensively, he's going to play quarterback and running back also. So he, in 2A, you have a lot of 2A athletes.
Yeah,
so
of course.
He's going to be really set on the offensive side. They've got Justice Bright back, who also played quarterback and running back. So they've got good athletes, and they've really got some good offensive linemen as well. Cale Harris and Jose Barba and some guys like that. So I think offensive line, the running game, and the linebackers, it's going to be pretty solid. The Aberdeen went 4-5 last year.
Yeah.
So
because I remember looking at it, our all area teams, Brody Beck at linebacker, I think he was a second team selection and was the only Aberdeen player to make our list. So, that's kind of the guy who I remember sticking out.
Yeah, and they started strong last year. They started 4-1, and they had some wins over like American Falls and Declo, which is a really good 2A team. And then they ended the year on a 4-game losing streak and just couldn't put it together. So optimism high at Aberdeen, that's for sure. So let's talk about you made the rounds on Monday. You went to Highland.
Yes.
The Rams, always competitive in the High Country Conference, District 5 and 6 for 5A football. I think it's going to be Highland and Rigby. It's been that way the last couple of seasons. But what is the feeling around Highland camp with head coach Gino Mariani?
That was the interesting thing, because I kind of figured it was going to be like this feeling of complete turnover. Okay, you lost your quarterback in Easton Durham. You lost, one of the best running backs in program history in Caleb DeMuzio. You lost Logan George, who got a scholarship offer to Utah State. You lost Luke Togiai, the brother of Tommy, who, had college offers. You lost all these pieces. How are you going to replace them? And then it's like you talk to Gino and he's like, yeah, I think we're, farther along this year at this point than we were last year. And it's like, what? And I think they've really bought into the scheme. And it's a lot of, guys who came up through the program and are really bought into it. You've got a new quarterback, Jack Whitmer. He's a senior, but last season, Gino thought highly of enough of him that he was the week 1 starter. I mean, they really thought he was going to be the guy, and he doesn't have the running ability that Easton Durham did. And he got in some trouble early on last season, and they ended up, benching him for Durham. And talking with Jack, it was like, yeah, that was a real learning lesson. Like, I realized I got to come out here every day, bust my chops, and realize that there's someone behind me who could take my job. So that was kind of really interesting, maturity from a high school kid, of not really sulking over getting benched last season, but rather like, how do I turn this into a learning experience? So I didn't, you didn't see a ton of him at, just a practice, but, he looked good. Gino was saying he understands the offense, better than anyone, just because he's been in it for so long and had to have such a grasp of it last season. And then on the defensive side, Nick Sorrell's defense is, always been pretty stout, and they don't exactly have the same top tier skill guys. But, there's a defensive lineman like Cody Colvin who moves around, basically like he's like a gazelle out there. I mean, just long legs, strides that are just like 6 feet deep. And he's just getting into the backfield like crazy. And then they got a cornerback, Adam Jones, who's, I think, an all-state selection at cornerback last season. He understands the defense really well. And he's kind of the leader of the secondary, kind of doling out, responsibilities to different guys and understanding, hey, you do this when I do this, and trying to, get everyone on the same page. So, yeah, I was kind of surprised. They seem to be, pretty far along.
Yeah, I think offensively, Highland, you talked about losing the quarterback and running back, but outside of that, they return a lot. I mean, Raymond Barella played receiver last year. Jackson Schumann's a good slot back. They return some good offensive linemen. Ian Allen's a solid O-lineman up front. I really do think if it's on the defense. If the Highland defense can come together, replacing a lot of guys, I think sky's the limit for Highland. The guys you mentioned that are back for Highland on defense were kind of complementary players last year. When you think of the studs last year, it was guys like Logan George, Luke Togiai, Easton Eddy, guys like that. And so can those complementary players now become the guy this year? That's going to be the biggest key, I think.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the question. But I think there's part of it too, where the coaching staff almost likes it. It's like, you don't have the ultra insane athleticism of a Logan George. You guys are now going to have to rely on the scheme. You have to do all these things right, because, rarely is your just speed or athleticism or something going to, just take over in a way that Logan George was able to. So I think there's, part of a positive in that. And I guess we'll see pretty early on how that's going to work, because they've got, the defending state champions the first week against Rocky Mountain. So that'll be a real litmus test early on.
Yeah, that's like a week 0 game. It's going to be Saturday, August 21st. So like 10 days from now.
At Holt Arena too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be cool. Did Gino tell you how that came together?
No, he didn't really mention how it came together, but it was weird because he was, already like, I don't know how many benefits there are of, having this game this early, but, I guess it gets everyone on the same page, and they've already started watching film of Rocky and going through all that type of stuff. But yeah, I didn't hear how it came together or how they got that going, but man, it's going to be interesting. That's for sure.
Yeah, and then after that, they turn around and they play in the Rocky Mountain Rumble against Alta High School from Utah. Yeah. And the thing with those Utah schools is they start 2 weeks ahead of Idaho. So by the time Highland has played 2 games, Alta High will have played 3, or 4 even.
For another 2 weeks, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's always interesting too, and then they play Logan High as well, and then they play the crosstown rivals, and then they get into conference play. Oh, how do you think the conference shakes out this year? Rigby brings back a lot of talent. Yeah. I'm hearing a lot of buzz about Thunder Ridge. People are really high on. Yeah. Madison's got a new coach. I mean, what do you think of the conference?
It's going to be interesting because you have so much unknown. I believe it is Rigby. Is Tiger Adolfo still there?
Yes.
So that's kind of the team that I think has the most stability, at least at that position. Like, you talk about Thunder Ridge is obviously they look pretty solid last year, but then you got the new coach at Madison. You got a new quarterback at Highland. I think Rigby's probably the favorites in that division. You even look what they did last year. I mean, that game against Highland had chances, but I mean, Rigby, their work in the trenches and then the play at Tiger Adolfo pretty much sealed that game. So I think it's probably Rigby 1 who can kind of compete for that second spot, or, can someone overtake them? Realistically, all it's going to come down to is, can someone beat Rigby head to head? I mean, that's probably going to, decide the district. I don't know. How do you see that shaking out?
Yeah, I think it's going to be just like we've seen the last 2 years, Highland and Rigby, and winning that matchup and winning the conference is so important because you get to stay home for so much longer. Highland took second last year and had to travel in the quarterfinal round, and the way the bracket is predetermined, they just happened to have to travel to Rocky. Those were probably 2 of the 5 best teams in the state, but they're playing in a quarterfinal matchup. So winning the conference is paramount, and I'm sure Gino feels that way because then you get a lot of home games. You're back in Holt Arena this year, which is an advantage. And I think it's going to come down to those 2 teams at the top. Yeah,
and then the other thing too is if you win it, you get the bye to start.
Yeah.
So it was like, I know they didn't have too tough of a time, Highland, in their first game, but it was a little close at halftime. You had to have Caleb DeMuzio getting like 45 carries. It's like these are things that maybe don't, if you single them out, aren't a huge deal. But if you're like, we need to play for 3 more weeks to win a state championship, all of a sudden, those carries, those extra times start adding up. And so, it might just come down to that Rigby Highland game again.
Yeah, that first round game against Meridian last year was wild. The wind was just blowing all over the place. And so I think finally Gino was like, I've had enough. I'm just going to give it to Caleb. And, like you said, I think it was like 45 carries in the game.
It was, they like hardly ever threw the ball. It was too much. They're like, nope, we're not doing this. Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah. So let's talk about Pocatello. Optimism is really high at Pokey, the Pocatello Thunder, getting ready for their new season as a new mascot and logo. I promised that I was going to upload the logo. So while I do that, tell me a little bit about what you saw from Pocatello at camp so far.
Yeah, he showed me the logo too. I liked it. But the first thing that sticks out is they've got a new guy at quarterback. It's not Zach Park anymore. It's going to be Ryan Payne. And, is that a decision that Dave Spillett came up with? No, apparently it wasn't. Zach Park and Ryan Payne decided, like, between themselves, Zach wanted to play wide receiver because he thought that's where he was best at. And Ryan was like, oh, I'll give quarterback a shot. So they went to, Coach Spillett in the winter and we're like, hey, this is our plan. Can we make this happen? Dave's like, sure. Like, he had hesitation for one weird reason, that Ryan Payne really couldn't throw a football. It was, these screen passes, these little things were just going straight into the ground. So in the winter, right after Ryan gets done with basketball season, he and Dave Spillett are going into the Pocatello gym, working on the mechanics of throwing. how do you grip a football? How many, steps do you take back in your drop? What foot are you planting on? How are you coming over the top? And so they had to kind of rework the entire mechanics of Ryan Payne's, throwing motion. And now he looks like a guy who could sling the ball about 55 yards down the field. It's kind of crazy to watch how that transformation goes. I would have liked to have seen like a montage of from the beginning to the end. So that part's going to make their offense more dynamic. They've got receivers like Cade Jensen. They're going to try and have Hunter Killian play tight end a little bit. And then they've got a running back, a small guy, Reichen Echohawk, who's not really so small anymore. He gained like 25 pounds. The dude looks like he has like 2% body fat.
Wow.
He's not super tall, maybe like 5'7", 5'8", but man, he just looks like a rock out there. And so they're going to, expect that he gets the ball a lot, that he's able to break runs, and that the offense is like, hey, Ryan, you're a new quarterback. Here's your safety blanket right here. And, Reichen had a good season last year. I think he had 400, 500 yards. But, now he's a sophomore that looks like a senior, and it's going to be like, oh, hey, let's see how that goes. And then obviously, that you've got the defense who's always led by Hunter Killian, who finally got an offer from Montana Tech. I'm a little surprised more schools haven't followed heading into his senior year. But, yeah, he looks like a stud as ever, and he wanted to get on that offensive side of the ball. But what are you've watched Killian a couple times. Like, what are your impressions? What makes him so good?
Yeah, so I got to start by saying we've been throughout the offseason doing these top 10 lists and listing the top 10 players in the state of Idaho by position, right? So we started back in July with the offensive linemen, and then we went to top 10 defensive linemen. And this week we did top 10 defensive backs, and next week we'll wrap up our final one with the top 10 quarterbacks. But a couple of weeks ago we did the top 10 linebackers. And boy, as soon as we published that list, the Pocatello fans, and that's what we want. We want discussion amongst us and the fans saying, hey, how come you didn't pay attention to this player, or you're not showing our team any respect? I want that conversation to happen. But man, the Pocatello fans definitely let me hear it, because I totally had a brain cramp and I forgot completely about Hunter Killian. And that's kind of, I think he makes so many spectacular plays and racks up so many tackles that it is easy to, like, what he does, it would be extraordinary for a lot of other players. Mm-hmm. But because he does it so often, it kind of becomes almost like run of the mill, and you kind of don't think about it, but
you expect it.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, do I add him to the list? I was like, I can't do that. It's top 10. I've made my bed. I got to lie in it. So this is my mea culpa to Pocatello Nation. I messed up. I forgot Hunter Killian. I messed up. He should have been on the top 10 list, and I apologize. I don't know that that's going to be he doesn't need any more motivation to go have a great season. He doesn't really care what I think. But I think he's going to be outstanding. He'll be an all-state linebacker, and the more offers should come in, I think, as the season progresses.
Definitely. Yeah. And so I guess the question for the Pocatello defense is, can everyone else kind of get on his level? And that's going to be the question. Is there enough pieces in the trenches that can compete against these other 4A offensive lines? Is Matt Christensen in the secondary, is that going to be enough? Is that enough athleticism to really just compete against some of these other schools? And I think that's the question for Pocatello. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, they've got skill guys galore. I think it's going to be, they'll go as far as their linemen take them. And I noticed on the offensive line, they were very thin there last year in terms of depth. And that is really what affected them in that regular season ending loss to Century, and then the first round loss to Bishop Kelly. They just were down a couple of linemen, didn't have the quality reserves to step in. And I know Coach Spillett is trying to make that area better. It looks like Jackson Williams, who was a great tight end last year, has moved to the offensive line full time.
And then Killian's going to go and try and play a little bit at tight end. And Dave was saying, like, we don't have a lot of depth in the trenches, and we're probably may never have a lot of depth in the trenches. So his big thing this offseason was like, we need to get these guys more ready to play. So they were in the weight room pretty much, all winter long, trying to get in there. And then also like doing like agility stuff with like the wide receivers. and like, okay, working on your footwork, things like that, and just making sure they were as versatile and as big as possible, knowing that, if they go down, there's not a whole lot of guys behind them who can, fill in.
Yeah. Yep. So, yeah, I think Pocatello has a lot of reason to be excited this year. Let me see if I can pull this up.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
That's the new Pocatello logo. So give us the breakdown here, Jordan.
I like it. I mean, it's kind of like the Buffalo Bills without that little line across it. And then you got the cool little P. Yeah, I think it's pretty sweet, actually. And Dave's whole thing is like into the storm is their mantra. Really kind of, taking hold of the Bison mascot and turning that into a real thing that the program can kind of rally around. Like, that's going to be our thing is, we're going into the storm like Bison do, because thunder's a little tough. I mean, it's a sound. Like, what are you going to do with thunder? But the Bison thing, he seems to really enjoy that. And he did a lot of research on, Bison and what they do to try to find something that he could relate to a program that has 100 plus years of history.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting for Pocatello this fall, and I'm looking forward to watching them compete. I think this was a good starting point. We kind of started with the teams we think are going to be really strong this year: West Side, Highland, Pocatello. Maybe next week we can talk about teams we think could be sleepers, dark horses, teams we think that could break through and surprise some people this year.
Definitely, yeah. That sounds awesome.
Okay. All right. Jordan Kay with the Idaho State Journal. What should we keep an eye out for at IdahoStateJournal.com or in the paper in the next week? What do you got going on?
In the next week, we've got the Gate City Grays, our local semi-pro team, in the playoffs right now. That's going on. And then this, still doing the previews part. So we're going to see if we can, get a couple of those online before they go into the physical paper. And so it's going to be kind of gearing up for a lot of high school stuff right now.
All right. It is a busy time of year, that's for sure. Jordan Kay, as always, thank you for joining us here on the Southeast Idaho Prepcast. You can get the audio for this at IdahoSports.com or wherever you download your podcasts. You can also see the video if you want to see what the Pocatello logo looks like. Check out the video of this podcast on our YouTube channel as well as our Facebook page. Until next time, thanks for tuning in to the Southeast Idaho Prepcast here on IdahoSports.com.